In 1857, just 5 years after the arrival of the first missionaries in the Carolines, preparations were being made to expand the mission to the east. Reverend Pearson and his wife, along with Reverend and Mrs. Doane, were on their way to the Marshalls to begin work there. The Marshalls were virgin territory as far as the missionaries were concerned. They were still free from the influence of foreign ship crews and beachcombers that was to be found on other islands. But that was because of the notorious reputation for inhospitality that the islands had acquired, thanks to repeated attacks on ships there. Reverend Edward Doane reported,
In 1834, Captain Dowsett mysteriously disappeared at Rongelap. In 1845, Captain Cheney of the Naiad had trouble with the dwellers upon Ebon, and one man was killed on the spot. In October 1852, the schooner Glencoe of San Francisco was burnt and the crew murdered by the inhabitants of Ebon. The reason for this conduct is that when the king was a young man, a ship visited Ebon, and an islander stole something which gave occasion for a disturbance. A general attack was made on the islanders, and many were killed, among them the chief Kaibuki's oldest brother. Kaibuki received a wound in the arm from a spade. His father declared he would have revenge and that he would kill all the whites he could and cut off ships when possible.
When the missionaries were landed on Ebon, they found themselves under the protection of none other than Kaibuki, the same chief who had waged a vendetta against Westerners for years. Kaibuki, once a formidable foe of Westerners, exchanged names with Reverend Pearson and told him that henceforth he would consider the missionary his son. The chief scrupulously kept his word, protecting the missionaries from harm and safeguarding their property. The growth of the church in the Marshalls was rapid. Hawaiian missionaries replaced the American pastors within a short time, and they soon carried the gospel to the other islands in the archipelago, first Namarik and Jaluit, and then to Majuro and Mili. Mission progress in the Marshalls was linked to the success of its schools. To meet the growing demand for education, the mission school on Ebon doubled in enrollment within 3 months, and 2 new schools soon had to be opened in the atoll. Reverend Edward Doane reported,
At all hours, through the day and into the evening, our house is thronged with scholars writing on their slates or reading. Many youth drop by in the evening and stay as long as we allow, reading and writing. Our little printing office, too, is the scene of similar interest. There are many faithful typesetters there, and the sheets printed are read over before the ink is fully dry upon them.
Thanks to the missionaries, the school had now become a part of Micronesian life. With the opening of the first training school on Ebon in 1869, a steady stream of Marshallese pastors and teachers were produced. By 1872, the last of the Hawaiian missionaries had left the islands, and Marshallese staffed their own churches. Within 15 years of its founding, the church in the Marshalls was fully under the control of local people. Training schools, the rough equivalent of today's high schools, were producing a crop of local church leaders. Three Pohnpeians and their wives, all products of the training school, set out for the Mortlachs in 1873 to carry the gospel to the Chuk area for the first time. Chuk, like the Marshalls, had a reputation for unfriendliness and was shunned by Western seamen. Yet the Pohnpeian teachers were well cared for, and they were soon working their way up the Mortlachs to the very threshold of the Chuk Lagoon. But here, progress stalled. It wasn't until several years later, in 1879, that the Pohnpeian pastor Moses was finally invited to begin preaching on the island of Uman. The mission in Chuk was founded at last. When Robert Logan arrived a few years later to begin work on Wena Chuk, there were already 15 churches established in Chuk and the Mortlachs. Chiefs on other islands were clamoring for a mission teacher of their own, now a mark of prestige. Chuk, which never had the paramount chiefs of its neighbors to the east, was rent with sporadic inter-island warfare. It was such wars that posed the biggest problem for the people, Christians or not. Reverend Logan became legendary for walking into the thick of battle with his trademark black umbrella held high over his head. Within minutes, the fighting would subside, with hostile parties returning to their own villages. Island warfare may not have entirely ended, but at least the pacifying element had been introduced.